Master Sergeant Rebecca Walsh had seen 22 years of service in the United States Marine Corps. Her graying hair was pulled back in the same tight bun she had worn since basic training, and the lines around her eyes told stories of desert deployments, sleepless nights, and decisions that saved lives. At 43 years old, she walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every stripe on her uniform. But on this particular Tuesday morning at Camp Pendleton, none of that seemed to matter. Rebecca entered the mess hall at 6:30 hours, just like she did every morning. The large dining facility buzzed with the usual sounds of morning chatter, clattering trays, and the smell of coffee and eggs. She had arrived in California only 3 days earlier, transferred from a small administrative post in Virginia to help with a special training program. Nobody here knew her yet. She was just another face in camouflage. She grabbed a tray and moved through the breakfast line, nodding politely to the kitchen staff. The young private serving scrambled eggs gave her a smile and an extra scoop. Rebecca thanked her and moved toward the coffee station. That is when it happened. As she reached for a cup, a large figure bumped into her from behind. Hard. The impact sent her tray tilting and hot coffee splashed across her hand. Rebecca gasped and steadied herself, turning to see who had run into her. A tall Marine corporal stood there, maybe 25 years old, with the build of someone who spent every free hour in the gym. His name tag read Morrison. He looked down at Rebecca with barely concealed annoyance. "Watch where you are going," he snapped. Rebecca blinked, confused. "Excuse me, you walked into me." Morrison let out a short, mocking laugh. Two of his buddies stood behind him, both lance corporals, grinning like they were watching a comedy show. "I do not think so, ma'am," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm on the last word. "Maybe you should pay more attention. We have got real Marines trying to get breakfast here." The words hit her like a slap. Real Marines. As if her 2 decades of service meant nothing. As if the scars on her back from a rocket attack in Fallujah were invisible. As if the Purple Heart in her dresser drawer was just a piece of metal. Rebecca felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice calm. "Corporal, I suggest you apologize and move along." Morrison smirked. "Apologize for what? You are in the way." He looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "What are you even doing here? File paperwork." His friends laughed. A few other Marines nearby had stopped eating to watch. Rebecca could feel their eyes on her. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed amused. She wanted to respond, to put this arrogant young man in his place. She outranked him by several grades. She could have him written up. She could march him to his commanding officer right now. But Rebecca had learned long ago that some battles were not worth fighting in public. She had faced worse than a disrespectful corporal. Much worse. "Move," she said quietly, her voice like steel. Morrison hesitated for just a moment. Something in her eyes must have warned him, because he stepped aside with an exaggerated bow. "Whatever you say, ma'am." Rebecca walked past him to an empty table in the corner. Her hand still stung from the coffee. She set down her tray and sat with her back to the wall, a habit from too many years in combat zones. She did not look at Morrison or his friends. She did not give them the satisfaction. But inside, anger burned hot and bright. She had not come to Camp Pendleton to be disrespected by some corporal who probably had never seen real combat. She had come here for a reason, though hardly anyone knew what that reason was. The transfer orders had been vague, marked with classifications she could not discuss. She reported directly to the base commander, but even he did not know the full story. Rebecca picked at her eggs, her appetite gone. Across the mess hall, Morrison and his friends had settled at a table, still laughing and joking. One of them mimicked a stumbling walk, clearly mocking her. More laughter. She took a deep breath and checked her watch. In 30 minutes, she had a meeting with the logistics staff. After that, equipment inspections. Then a briefing at 1400 hours. She had work to do, important work, and she would not let some ignorant corporal ruin her focus. But as she sat there in the corner of that crowded mess hall, surrounded by fellow Marines who had either watched her humiliation or ignored it entirely, Rebecca felt something she had not felt in years. She felt alone. The Marine Corps had been her life since she was 21 years old. She had given everything to it. She had missed her sister's wedding because she was deployed. She had spent 3 Christmases in Iraq. She had held dying men in her arms and written letters to their mothers. She had earned the respect of everyone she served with. Or so she thought. Maybe things were different now. Maybe the Corps had changed while she was busy serving it. Or maybe this was just how it was when you were a woman of a certain age, when your uniform could not hide the gray in your hair or the wear in your joints. Maybe to young Marines like Morrison, she was just an old lady taking up space. Rebecca finished her coffee and stood up. She bussed her tray and walked out of the mess hall with her head high and her shoulders back. She would not let them see her hurt. She would not give them that power. But as she stepped out into the bright California morning, the sun already warming the air, Rebecca made herself a promise. She had not survived 22 years in the Marine Corps by being weak or by backing down. Whatever happened next, she would handle it her way, with dignity, with strength. And if Corporal Morrison thought he had seen the last of her, he was very much mistaken. The rest of that Tuesday passed in a blur of meetings and paperwork. Rebecca threw herself into work the way she always did when something bothered her. It was easier to focus on supply chains and training schedules than to think about the mess hall incident. But word had already started to spread. By Wednesday morning, Rebecca noticed the looks. As she walked across the base, groups of young Marines would glance her way and whisper. Some would smirk. Others would quickly look away, embarrassed. The story had grown in the telling, as stories always do. She heard a version of it while passing the motor pool. "Did you hear about that old master sergeant? Morrison said she tried to pull rank on him just for bumping into her, acting like she owns the place." Rebecca kept walking. She would not dignify it with a response. In her small office in the administration building, she tried to concentrate on her work. The special training program she was helping to develop involved new combat medical procedures. It was important, life-saving work. But every time she looked at the documents in front of her, she saw Morrison's smirking face. Her assistant, a young sergeant named Chen, knocked on the door frame. "Master Sergeant Walsh, I have those requisition forms you asked for." "Thank you, Chen. Just leave them on the desk." Chen hesitated. "Ma'am, if I may ask, are you doing okay?" Rebecca looked up. Chen was a good Marine, barely 23, with earnest eyes and a respectful manner. "I am fine, Sergeant. Why do you ask?" "It is just, I heard some things about the mess hall." Chen shifted uncomfortably. "I want you to know that not everyone thinks it is funny. Some of us think Morrison was out of line." Rebecca felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. "I appreciate that, Chen, but I can handle Corporal Morrison." "Yes, ma'am, I know you can." Chen smiled slightly. "I looked up your service record. Fallujah, Helmand Province, embassy duty in Yemen. You have done more for this Corps than Morrison will do in 10 lifetimes." "That was kind of you to look into," Rebecca said, though she was not sure if she liked being researched. "But the past is the past. We all have to earn respect every day, regardless of what we did yesterday." "With respect, ma'am, I disagree. Respect is not just earned. Sometimes it is owed." Chen nodded and left the office. Rebecca sat back in her chair, Chen's words echoing in her mind. Respect is owed. It was a nice thought, but the Marine Corps did not work that way. Not really. You were only as good as your last performance, your last decision, your last mission. Everything else was just stories. That evening, Rebecca went to the gym. Exercise had always been her therapy, her way of processing the world. She changed into her PT gear and headed for the weight room. Morrison was there. He was bench pressing an impressive amount of weight, surrounded by his usual group of admirers. When he saw Rebecca enter, His face split into a grin. He made a show of adding more plates to the bar. "Hey guys, better lift heavy," he said loudly. "We have got to show the older generation how it is done." Laughter rippled through the group. Rebecca ignored them and moved to the free weights on the other side of the room. She picked up 25-pound dumbbells and started her shoulder routine. Her form was perfect, controlled, each movement deliberate. 25 pounds, someone whispered behind her, more snickering. Rebecca continued her set, 10 reps, 15, 20. Her shoulders burned, but she did not stop. She switched to curls, then to rows. She worked through her entire routine with mechanical precision, blocking out the mocking voices. When she finished, she wiped down the weights and headed for the door. As she passed Morrison's group, one of them called out, "Hey, Master Sergeant, need help carrying anything. Would not want you to hurt yourself." Rebecca stopped. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to be the bigger person, but something inside her had reached its limit. She turned slowly and looked at the lance corporal who had spoken. He was young, maybe 22, with a cocky expression that reminded her of 100 other young Marines she had trained over the years. "What is your name, Marine?" she asked calmly. The smile faded from his face. "Lance Corporal Davis, ma'am." "Lance Corporal Davis, do you know what I did before I came here?" Davis glanced at Morrison, unsure. "No, ma'am." "I spent 8 months training combat medics for forward deployment. Before that, I was in charge of logistics for an entire regiment in Afghanistan. And before that, I spent 2 tours in Iraq, where I pulled 3 wounded Marines out of a burning vehicle after a roadside bomb nearly killed us all." She took a step closer. "So no, Lance Corporal Davis, I do not need help carrying 25-pound dumbbells, but thank you for your concern." The room had gone silent. Davis looked at the floor. "Yes, ma'am, sorry, ma'am." Rebecca nodded and walked out. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding her system. She had not wanted to make a speech. She had not wanted to justify herself, but sometimes enough was enough. As she walked back to her quarters in the evening air, she felt both satisfied and uneasy. She had stood up for herself, yes, but she had also shown that their comments bothered her. In the Corps, showing weakness was blood in the water. Her phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Richards, the base commander. "Need to see you in my office tomorrow at 800. Important." Rebecca stared at the message. She had a sinking feeling she knew what this was about. Someone had probably complained. Either Morrison had reported her for the gym confrontation, or someone else had filed a report about the mess hall incident. Either way, she was likely about to be counseled about maintaining professional relationships or not escalating conflicts. She texted back a simple "yes, sir," and went to bed early. That night she dreamed of Fallujah, the dust, the heat, the sound of gunfire. In the dream, she was trying to reach her team, but every time she got close, they moved further away. She woke up at 400, sweating and disoriented. Rebecca got up, showered, and put on a fresh uniform. She made sure every crease was perfect, every button aligned. If she was going to face Colonel Richards, she would do it looking like the professional she was. At 7:45, she stood outside the base commander's office. Her stomach churned with nerves, though she would never show it. The door opened and a captain stepped out. "Master Sergeant Walsh, the colonel will see you now." Rebecca walked in and came to attention. "Master Sergeant Rebecca Walsh, reporting as ordered, sir." Colonel Richards looked up from his desk. He was a man in his early 50s, with iron-gray hair and sharp blue eyes. His office walls were covered with commendations and photos from deployments around the world. "At ease, Master Sergeant. Please sit down." Rebecca sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Richard studied her for a long moment. "I have been hearing stories about you." "Yes, sir, I imagine you have." "Do you want to tell me your side?" Rebecca took a breath. A corporal bumped into me in the mess hall, spilled coffee on me, and then made disrespectful comments. I chose not to escalate at the time. Yesterday at the gym, I responded verbally to continued disrespect from one of his associates. That is all, sir. Richards nodded slowly. Murasan filed a complaint, said you were pulling rank inappropriately and creating a hostile environment. Rubica felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice level. That is not accurate, sir. I know. Richards leaned back in his chair. I pulled Murasan's service record, 3 counseling statements in the past year for disrespectful behavior, 2 incidents with female NCOs. The kid has an attitude problem and I am dealing with it. He paused. But that is not why I called you here. Rubica blinked surprised. Sir. I got a phone call yesterday from Quantica, from General Bridger himself. Richard smiled slightly. Apparently, you are not just here for a training program, are you, Master Sergeant Walsh? Rubica's heart skipped. I cannot discuss that, sir. No, I do not expect you to. But the general made it very clear that you are here on special assignment and that I am to provide you with whatever support you need. Richard stood up. He also told me something else, something that explains a lot. Rubica waited, her pulse racing. He told me what you did in Syria. Rubica felt the color drain from her face. Syria. Of all the things Colonel Richards could have mentioned, that was the one thing she had hoped would stay buried. Sir, that mission is classified. I cannot. Richards held up his hand. I know. General Bridger did not give me details. He just said you saved a lot of lives at great personal risk, and that what you did there is why you are here now. He sat back down and looked at her with new respect. He also said that anyone who gives you trouble is going to answer to him personally. Rubica did not know what to say. She had spent the last 3 days being mocked and dismissed. Now, suddenly, the base commander was looking at her like she was someone important. I appreciate that, sir, but I do not need special treatment. I just want to do my job. And you will, Richard said. But I want you to know that I have your back. Murasan is being reassigned to a different unit. His complaint is being dismissed. And I am making it clear to everyone under my command that you are here doing important work, and you will be treated with the respect your rank deserves. Thank you, sir. Richard studied her again. Can I ask you something off the record? Of course, sir. Why did you not come to me when Murasan disrespected you? Why did you let it go? Rubica considered the question. Because, sir, I have been dealing with men like Murasan my entire career. If I reported every incident, I would spend all my time filing paperwork instead of doing my job. I learned a long time ago to pick my battles. That is unfortunate, Richard said quietly. The Corps should be better than that. Yes, sir, it should, Rubica stood. Will that be all, sir? One more thing. There is a ceremony on Friday, change of command for the 3rd Battalion. General Bridger will be there along with 3 other generals. They are making a special trip. Richard smiled. I think it might have something to do with you. Rubica felt her stomach flip. Sir. Just be in dress blues at 1,000 hours on Friday. That is an order. Yes, sir. Rubica left the colonel's office in a daze. She walked across the base, her mind spinning. General Bridger was coming here. 4 generals were coming, for a change of command ceremony that should have been a routine event. It could only mean one thing. They were going to recognize her publicly for Syria. The thought terrified her. What happened in Syria was supposed to stay secret. She had been embedded with a special operations team, providing medical support during a hostage rescue mission. When everything went wrong and the team was pinned down by enemy fire, Rubica had done what needed to be done. She had grabbed a rifle and held off attackers while dragging 3 wounded operators to safety. She had performed emergency surgery in a bombed-out building with limited supplies. She had kept those men alive for 8 hours until extraction arrived. 2 of those men died anyway, but 4 others survived because of her. The mission was classified. The citation that came with her medal was vague, mentioning extraordinary heroism without any details. She had been told to never discuss it. She had been given a small ceremony at Quantuca with just a handful of officers present, awarded a silver star, and then sent back to her regular duties. That was 2 years ago. She thought it was over. She thought she could just be a regular Marine again. But apparently, someone had decided it was time to tell her story. The next 2 days were strange. Word spread quickly that Morrison had been reassigned. The rumors about Rebecca began to change. Instead of mocking whispers, there were curious looks. People started treating her differently. Marines she did not know would nod respectfully as she passed. The young corporal at the mess hall gave her extra portions without being asked. Sergeant Chen came into her office on Thursday morning with a cup of coffee. "Heard you are getting some kind of award tomorrow, ma'am." "Where did you hear that?" "Everyone is talking about it. They are saying you are a hero, that you did something classified and brave, and now 4 generals are flying in to honor you." Rebecca sighed. "Chen, can I tell you something?" "Of course, ma'am." "I do not feel like a hero. I feel like someone who did her job. I feel like someone who lost good men despite her best efforts." She looked out the window at the Marines training in the distance. "And I feel like tomorrow is going to change everything, and I am not sure I want that." Chen was quiet for a moment. "My dad was a Marine, Vietnam. He got a Bronze Star for pulling his lieutenant out of a rice paddy while under fire. When I asked him about it, he said the same thing you just said, that he was just doing his job." Chen smiled. "But you know what else he said? He said the medal was not really for him. It was for everyone else, to remind them what the Corps stands for, to inspire them to be better." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Your dad sounds like a wise man." He died 3 years ago, cancer from Agent Orange exposure." Chen stood up. "He would have been proud to serve with someone like you, ma'am." After Chen left, Rebecca sat alone in her office. She thought about all the moments that had led her here. The scared 21-year-old who signed up for the Marines because she did not know what else to do with her life. The young corporal who discovered she was good at keeping people alive. The sergeant who learned to lead. The staff sergeant who earned her stripes in the desert. The master sergeant who refused to quit even when her body was screaming at her to stop. She thought about the men and women she had served with over the years, the ones who made it home and the ones who did not, the ones who remembered her and the ones who had forgotten. She thought about every person she had saved and every person she could not save. And she thought about Morrison and his mocking grin. She thought about all the other Morrisons she had encountered over 2 decades, the ones who dismissed her because she was a woman, the ones who thought she was too old, too soft, too weak, the ones who never bothered to learn her story before judging her. Tomorrow they would learn. Friday morning came too quickly. Rebecca put on her dress blues with trembling hands. She polished her shoes until they gleamed. She straightened her ribbons, including the silver star ribbon that sat prominently on her chest. She looked at herself in the mirror. A middle-aged woman looked back. Gray hair, worry lines, scars both visible and hidden, but also strength, determination, survival. She was ready. The ceremony was being held on the parade ground. As Rebecca approached, she saw that a huge crowd had gathered. Not just the 3rd Battalion, but what looked like half the base. Bleachers had been set up for guests and family members. A stage stood at one end, decorated with flags and the Marine Corps emblem. And on that stage stood 4 generals in their dress uniforms. Rebecca's breath caught. General Bridger was there, the man who had commanded the Syria operation. Next to him stood General Hammond, the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps. General Torres, who oversaw all West Coast operations, and General Patricia Morrison, no relation to the corporal, who was the highest-ranking woman in the Corps. This was not just a ceremony, this was a statement. Rebecca stood at the edge of the parade ground, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone around her must be able to hear it. The morning sun was bright, reflecting off the polished brass and metals of hundreds of Marines in formation. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and the distant ocean. A captain approached her. "Master Sergeant Walsh, please come with me." Rebecca followed him along the side of the bleachers. She could feel eyes on her. Families whispered and pointed. Marines she had never met watched her pass with expressions of curiosity and respect. As they approached the stage, Rebecca saw him. Morrison. Corporal Morrison stood in formation with his unit, his face pale and his jaw tight. When their eyes met for just a second, he quickly looked away. She saw something there she had not seen before. Shame. The captain led her to a spot off to the side of the stage, near where the colors stood. "Please wait here, Master Sergeant. They will call you forward when it is time." The change of command ceremony began. The outgoing commander of 3rd Battalion gave his farewell speech. The incoming commander gave his acceptance speech. The battalion colors were passed from one man to the other. It was all very traditional, very proper. Then General Bridger stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Marines, distinguished guests," he began, his voice carrying across the parade ground. "We have something special planned today, something beyond the normal change of command." The crowd grew quiet. Rebecca felt her palms sweating. 22 years ago, Bridger continued, a young woman from a small town in Ohio walked into a recruiting office and signed her name on the dotted line. She did not come from a military family. She did not have any special connections. She just had a desire to serve her country. Rebecca's throat tightened. This was really happening. That woman became a Marine. She became a corpsman. She became someone her fellow Marines could count on when the bullets started flying and the blood started flowing. She served in Iraq during some of the darkest days of that conflict. She served in Afghanistan. She served in places we still cannot talk about, doing things we still cannot discuss. Bridger paused and looked directly at Rebecca. Master Sergeant Rebecca Walsh, front and center. Rebecca's legs felt like rubber, but she marched forward. Left, right, left, right. Her dress shoes clicked on the pavement. She climbed the stairs to the stage and came to attention in front of the 4 generals. "At ease, Master Sergeant," Bridger said. Rebecca shifted to parade rest, hands clasped behind her back. General Hammond stepped forward. He was a stocky man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Master Sergeant Walsh, 2 years ago you were part of a classified operation in Syria. Due to the sensitive nature of that mission, we could not publicly recognize your actions at the time. But circumstances have changed, and it is time for the Marine Corps and the nation to know what you did." He pulled a paper from his pocket and began to read. On the night of March 15th, during a hostage rescue operation, Master Sergeant Walsh's team came under heavy enemy fire. 2 operators were critically wounded. Another 2 were injured. The team was pinned down in an urban environment with limited cover and no immediate support available. Rebecca could hear the story, but in her mind she was back there. The smell of cordite and blood, the screams, the darkness lit by muzzle flashes. Master Sergeant Walsh immediately moved to provide medical care under fire. When enemy forces attempted to overrun their position, she took up a weapon and held them off while simultaneously treating the wounded. For 8 hours, she kept her team alive through a combination of medical skill and combat action. She performed emergency surgery with limited supplies. She fought off multiple attacks, and when extraction finally arrived, all 4 wounded operators were still breathing. Hammond looked up from the paper. 2 of those men died later from their wounds, but they died surrounded by their families, not alone in a Syrian street. The other 2 recovered fully and are serving today because of Master Sergeant Walsh's actions. The crowd was silent. Rebecca could see Marines in the formation with tears in their eyes. General Torres stepped forward now. He was a tall, thin man with a stern face that softened as he spoke. What makes Master Sergeant Walsh's actions even more remarkable is this: she had already been wounded herself. Shrapnel from a grenade had torn into her back. She was bleeding in pain and should have been evacuated immediately, but she refused to leave her team. She kept fighting. She kept working. She did her job. Rebecca had not wanted anyone to know about the wound. It seemed like bragging, but of course, it was in the report. Everything was always in the report. General Patricia Morrison, Rebecca had done her research and knew this general had fought her own battles for respect throughout her career, stepped forward with a small box. Master Sergeant Walsh, your Silver Star was awarded in a small ceremony 2 years ago. But today, on behalf of the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the Secretary of the Navy, we are also presenting you with the Navy Cross. Rebecca's knees nearly buckled. The Navy Cross. It was the second highest decoration for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. She had never imagined, never even dreamed. General Morrison opened the box, revealing the distinctive medal with its bronze cross and ribbon. For extraordinary heroism in combat, for placing the lives of your fellow Marines above your own safety, for embodying everything we value in the Corps, we honor you today. She pinned the medal to Rebecca's uniform right above the Silver Star. Then she did something unexpected. She hugged her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing every woman in this Corps what is possible." One by one, the 4 generals saluted Rebecca. She returned each salute with precision, though her vision was blurred with tears. "There is one more thing," General Bridger said, returning to the microphone. "Master Sergeant Walsh is here at Camp Punton to develop a new training program that will save countless lives in future conflicts. Her experience, her knowledge, her dedication, these things are invaluable to the Marine Corps. And anyone who fails to treat her with the respect she has earned will answer to me personally." He looked out at the formation, his gaze sharp. Rebecca knew that look was meant for Morrison and anyone else who had doubted her. Someone shouted from the formation, then another voice, and another. Soon the entire parade ground was echoing with the Marine battle cry. "OREH, OREH, OREH." Rebecca stood on that stage, surrounded by generals honored by her corps, and for the first time in days, maybe years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The ceremony ended. As Rebecca walked down from the stage, Marines approached her to shake her hand and thank her. Officers and enlisted alike, men and women, young and old. They wanted to touch the uniform of a genuine hero. Through the crowd, Rebecca saw Morrison. He stood apart from his unit, watching. When he saw her looking at him, he walked over. She stiffened, unsure what to expect. Morrison came to attention and saluted. "Master Sergeant Walsh, I owe you an apology. I was disrespectful, I was ignorant, I was wrong." His voice shook slightly. "I am sorry." Rebecca returned the salute. She looked at this young Marine who had mocked her, shoved her, tried to diminish her. He looked smaller now, younger, human. "Apology accepted, Corporal. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." "I will be better, ma'am, I promise." "See that you are dismissed." Morrison walked away, his shoulders slumped. Rebecca felt no satisfaction in his humiliation, just a tired sort of sadness that it had come to this, that she had needed 4 generals and a public ceremony to earn basic respect. But maybe that was the point. Maybe this ceremony was not just about her. Maybe it was about every woman who had ever been dismissed, every older Marine who had been mocked as past their prime, every person who had been judged by appearance rather than merit. The days following the ceremony were different. Rebecca walked across Camp Punton now, and Marines she had never met would stop and salute. Young privates would ask for her autograph. NCOs would ask for advice. Officers would invite her to lunch to hear her stories. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and if she was honest with herself, a little embarrassing. She still had work to do. The training program was not going to develop itself. She spent long hours in meetings with medical officers, reviewing procedures and updating protocols. She worked with instructors to create realistic scenarios that would prepare corpsmen for the chaos of combat. She poured everything she knew, everything she had learned through pain and experience, into making sure the next generation would be ready. But now people listened when she spoke. Now her suggestions were taken seriously. Now her rank and her experience meant something again. 1 week after the ceremony, Rebecca was walking to her office when she saw a familiar figure. Corporal Murason stood outside the building, clearly waiting for her. He came to attention as she approached. "At ease, Corporal, can I help you?" Murason shifted his weight nervously. "Ma'am, I know I already apologized, but I wanted to say something else, if you have a minute." Rebecca checked her watch. She had a few minutes before her next meeting. "Go ahead." "I talked to my grandfather. He is a retired Marine, did 2 tours in Vietnam. I told him what happened, what I did." Murason looked at the ground. "He chewed me out worse than any drill instructor ever did. But he also told me something. He said the best Marines are the ones who admit when they are wrong and then work to fix it." "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He is, ma'am, and he said I should ask you something." Murason met her eyes. "He said I should ask if you would be willing to teach me, not officially just. If I could maybe sit in on some of your training sessions, learn from someone who has actually been there."